How are you, Mr. Meltzer?
Hi, neighbor. I am good. I am back from D.C. I am made it back for Halloween to ensure that one child was not mad at me, and then I'm still wearing my red sweater. I think I'm going to sleep in this thing forever.
I was going to ask you, did you? Well, I mean, I know that you were back home for Halloween. Two things: did you dress up as Fred Rogers for Halloween?
Of course. Are you kidding me? Of course I do. What kind of promotion you think we're doing here? So you can't come out with a book called I Am Mr. Rogers and not dress up like Fred Rogers. I mean, and the craziest part, Elliot, is I've been wearing, I started in Pittsburgh on Thursday as Mr. Rogers, and I wore it almost every day. And I realized one thing. I'm going to wear this red sweater forever because everyone in the whole universe is nicer to you. Like, I got into my Uber, and the guy's like, "You Brad?" And I'm like, "Hi, neighbor." And they were the nicest people in the whole world to me. They were just like, "Yeah, you're my neighbor. Come in, let's go." And I was like, well, we're idiots. We should all just walk around in red sweaters. The world would be a better place.
Hey, were you was the Meltzer house busy for Halloween last night?
Of course. Oh my God. We take Halloween very seriously here. So we host the party. We are the ones who put it on. It's gotten smaller as each kid graduates and goes to college. It gets smaller, but we still have our youngest is in 10th grade. And he although he's at the point where they went out just to like look at costumes and like not really get candy, but maybe scare people because they were dressed as Rick and Morty.
Right.
And I was like, oh, it's that point in Halloween, like the teenager version of Halloween.
All right, so let's get to the book. And I will tell you this, Brad, a couple of things. Number one, I was not a Mr. Rogers kid when I was growing up. I mean, I've seen the show, but I couldn't really tell you anything about the show. I don't know a ton about Fred Rogers. I didn't see the movie when it came out with Tom Hanks. So I don't have a deep historical relationship with Mr. Rogers. But all of that being said, dude, the book is amazing. Like, I remember you sent me a text. I can't remember how long ago it was when you were working on it, and you were like, "This one is so good," and I was like, "Okay, it's fantastic, Brad. It really is."
No, I mean, this is one of the few. I think there's like 2 or 3 books that while I was writing made me cry, and this was one of them because. I mean, listen, look at where we all are right now, right? Where our kids are scrolling through their phones. They're on Instagram, they're on TikTok. We're on Instagram, we're on TikTok. We're all on everything. We're scrolling. The news is like a fire hose. And Mr. Rogers stands for the idea sometimes you just need to slow down. And, look where the world is. It feels like the world's on fire. And Mr. Rogers is like this superhero of kindness. And as I'm reading the book, I'm just like, I can't believe he's so good. And it makes you want to be good when you kind of read and learn about him. And I personally become 5 years old again anytime I hear him, because when I was 5 years old, Mr. Rogers and Jim Henson, taught me you could use your creativity to put good into the world. And our kids' book series, that's all we're trying to do is just use our creativity to put some good back in the world. That's what I Am Mr. Rogers is all about.
Hey, Brad, have you heard from a lot of people, and you said that like you were crying during it. Have you heard from a lot of people that have teared up or cried? And listen, is this number 30 or 31 or something like that in the library? 31 in the library.
Yeah, 31.
And listen, I've read every single one of them. I'm happy to say that. And I've read this one cover to cover. But are people telling you that more so than others, that this one makes them tear up and cry?
The book is only out yesterday, so I'll find out more as we go, but I already had someone. I mean, there's already people posting saying, they said, I got my my son's book already in tears. Like people posted on Twitter, it's just, and I think it's because we all, it's not just a nostalgia thing. Like I can pull lots of things from your youth that'll make you go like, oh, I remember that. But there's very few things that hit you to your core and make you feel like the innocence of your youth and what it really felt like to feel where everything was safe. And not all of us had safe childhoods, right? Make no mistake. But when I sat in front of Mr. Rogers and he looked at me and he said to me, there's no one like you before. There never will be anyone like you again. And I love you I like you just the way you are. I was like, thank you. That was a safe place for me in the chaos of my childhood.
Also, when it opens, and then like, and for me, I'm learning stuff about Fred Rogers that I didn't know. When he's a kid, reading all that stuff where he was bullied bad and he would run home, and he even says, I spent so much time crying in my room. I was like, oh my God, this poor dude.
Yeah, listen, my son has been bullied. You know, we've seen this firsthand. You know, he grows up in Pennsylvania, in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. And it's a small town. It's got a real trolley. People know each other's names. It's a real neighborhood. But he's, as you said, he's bullied. He cries. He's mad at those kids. It's not like Mr. Rogers never mad. He's not perfect. Everyone thinks he's perfect. He even mails away for, like, you know, in the back of a comic book, they have the thing where you can, like, guy kick sand in your face and you can mail away for, like, a way to get muscles.
Right.
Like, he mails away for that exercise kid. But it doesn't happen. It doesn't work for him because he finally realizes it's all right to feel how you're feeling. And to me, what I love the most about Mr. Rogers is, you know, his mother, when he's a little kid, finds out they have money, and the mother finds out that there are kids in school that don't have enough money for shoes. So she buys sneakers for the kid. She gives them to the school nurse, and the kid's like, oh, who donated these? And the mother, Mr. Rogers' mother, never takes credit for it.
Right.
She starts buying furniture. She starts buying clothes. She starts buying all these things, never takes credit. And what does he teach? What does she teach her son? How to be a good neighbor. And then when he would see scary things in the news, she gives him one of life's great lessons. She says to him, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And my God, I want my daughter to have that lesson now. I want my sons to have that lesson. I need that lesson right now to look for the helpers. And I, you know, those are the things that for me, when I'm writing this book, I'm like, oh, Mr. Rogers' show is just him building all the things from his life, a neighborhood, a trolley, you know, make believe and being a helper.
And, you know, it's funny how you said that the show was kind of everything from his life, because then you go look at his life and you go, well, now I understand how he ends up being who he is. So, yes, he's bullied and he's taught that it's okay to be scared. He was scared of the doctor. I think he says he was literally scared of everything. But he was always told that's how you feel. Like, it's okay to be scared. But you point out in the book, Brad, that Mr. Rogers was like, he had scarlet fever. He was sick a lot. So at times he would be by himself. And in order to fill the time of just being a bored kid, he would sit there and his own creativity would take over. And he would just use like his little toys or whatever they were to create stories. But that kind of gets towards him using puppets.
Yeah, so he's basically sick so much, as you said, asthma, scarlet fever, it's crazy. And he would sit in his bed, prop up his knees under the covers, and then use like his little cars and a little train set and make his knees into a mountain and pretend he was climbing the mountain, and he would enter his world of make-believe. And then his parents built a puppet theater in their attic, and he, you know, a real stage, and he'd entertain his family, he'd entertain his friends. And what he realized is telling those make-believe stories made him feel better. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. Oh, this isn't for just for us. It's for him. You know, his dad teaches him, you know, the beauty of music. And he says, music's the one art every one of us has inside us.
Right.
Like, even if you can't play an instrument, you can sing along, you can tap your feet. And like, that's where he falls in love with music. And you're like, oh, this is like not just the origin story of him. It's the origin story of the show. Like, everything he gives us is everything that in his own life helped him through his hardest times. And you're like, oh, now it all makes sense.
You know who I really loved? I loved his grandfather.
Oh, that scene with it. My grandfather is arguably one of the most important people in my life. And that is where I was undone, that grandfather scene. So his grandfather is named Fred McFeely, and that's where he gets the name Mr. McFeely from. It's named after his grandfather. He's named after his grandfather, Fred. And after each visit with his grandfather would say these words, and these words, they still choke me up. He'd say, you made this day a special day for me. And Fred Rogers later says he helped me realize how valuable every human being is, including myself. And isn't that beautiful? That the love from a grandparent is so special. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, my grandfather changed my life by teaching me the value of stories. He used to tell, he was my storyteller when I was little. And I got to that, and I'm like, oh, this is it. Although you got to love his grandmother, because his grandmother just has money.
Right.
And he says to his grandmother, like, I want to buy a piano. And the grandmother, without batting an eye, goes, go pick out a piano. So Fred Rogers, at 10 years old, takes the trolley to downtown Pittsburgh, plays every piano in a fancy piano store. The salesman's like, he's like, I'll take this one. It's like a secondhand Steinway. And the clerk is like, I don't think you can afford it, kid. You're 10 years old. And the next day, the salesperson can't believe it when little 10-year-old Fred Rogers comes back with a check and basically is like, my Nana says hi, give me a piano. and he gets a piano. And I'm just like, that's the most badass grandmother of all time. It's just like, here you go, kid. Go buy yourself a piano. Like, my grandma's bought me like a Matchbox cars, like, that's like a freaking piano.
Hey, who's Gabby Hayes?
So Gabby Hayes is like this old guy on New York City and on NBC. He's like an old star on a show. And he's like a cliche kind of looking, if you saw him for a second, like a cowboy. So his show was like, howdy, young whippersnappers, like every cliche you could have. You're darn tootin', I will. But the thing that Gabby Hayes did, it was Fred Rogers' first job in television. So he's just starting out, first job ever. And Gabby Hayes used to talk directly to the camera, to all the little kids who were watching his show. And Fred Rogers said to him, how do you connect to an audience when they're not in the studio with you and you can't see them? And Gabby Hayes, this rootin' tootin' cowboy, explains to him, I focus on one little buckaroo. Just think about talking to one of them, one little buckaroo. And that's what Fred Rogers eventually does, right? Looks in the camera, focuses on what feels like just you, and he's like, I like you just the way you are. And it's Gabby Hayes who gives him that lesson.
I always like to find the moment, and I don't know why, but I feel like like in the Ordinary People Change the World series, and like you take these people that obviously we know, who are famous, whether it's historical or whatever field they're out of, right? I always like to find the moment, if possible, where everything changes. And if it wasn't for that moment, and yes, you could argue without his grandfather and without Gabby Hayes and all of that other stuff that builds up to who he becomes. If that movie doesn't snap and break in Pittsburgh, do we get Mr. Rogers?
It's the best moment. Let's talk about this. So Fred Rogers is on this show called The Children's Corner. This is like his first show as a kid, kids entertainer. And the station manager is a woman named Dorothy Daniel, gives everyone a present right before the show starts. And she gives Fred Rogers a puppet, a little tiger puppet. Her name is Dorothy Daniel. And that's where he gets Daniel Tiger, names it after her. So he's on the show. It's the very first episode. They're trying to show a movie. It's like an old film strip. And the film strip snaps, breaks. And they panic. They're like, oh, my gosh, it's a live show. They're like, Fred, you got to do something. He's like, what do we do? He's like, do something. And he grabs the little tiger puppet, and he literally pushes, like rams his hand through the back of the scenery. He's, back of the stage, shoves it through the scenery where it comes through this kind of painted clock. And he's like, I hope this works. And suddenly, boom, here comes this tiger puppet. And that is the first moment where he speaks through Daniel Tiger on the air. He's not planning to use puppets on the show. He's just filling time. And basically the host of the show, he wasn't even the host, is like having a bad day one day, and she says, oh, I'm so upset. And he says, tell me about it. And he starts talking through the puppet, and she starts talking to him. And all of a sudden, kids around, all around Pittsburgh are watching. And they're like, what's this? And now thousands of kids, it's just like the conversation when he's little, his make-believe conversations, his puppet shows.
Right.
But now all these kids are watching, and there's the birth of Mr. Rogers. And you're like, exactly right. You look at that and you're like, if the film reel doesn't snap, does he try using a puppet? Does he do this? Or does he just become like a nice guy who works in the background of TV shows? But that's the moment we get him. He comes to life right there. Everything in your life sometimes, you feel like leads to a moment. And for all of us, we have this moment that, if it didn't go this way, your whole life changes. And that's the one for Mr. Rogers.
Hey, Brad, like you talked about early on, like, and you know, I remember when the movie came out and we were just on the show talking about Mr. Rogers. And again, like I said, I have no history with Mr. Rogers and know nothing really or very little about him. Is in doing all the research and stuff, and you mentioned it earlier where it's like, he got mad. Like it's not like he was like, oh, I got bullied and I'm a pussy. Like he wanted to like get muscles and be able to go after him. Like when you're putting all that together, is there anything where you look back and you go like, oh boy, Fred went through a dark period? Or was it like wanting to get stronger to defend himself? Was that like pushing it for him?
You know, the thing for me, every time I do these books, what's so important to me is to make sure that kids and us don't see these people as perfect. That's the problem we have today. We take our heroes and look what we do in D.C., right? We build these giant statues and monuments of them. We carve them out of granite, and we make them like they're perfect in every way. And anyone you look up to, whether it's Abraham Lincoln or Rosa Parks or Mr. Rogers, they have moments where they're scared, where they're terrified, where they're angry, where they're pissed at the world. And it's important. Like when I found those moments where Mr. Rogers was mad, it was important to me. I'm like, that has to go in the book. Because people need to realize, even Gandhi, I have the moment where Gandhi, I'm like, you got to show people that these are human beings. And that way, these aren't the stories of famous people. This is what we're all capable of in our best days. I want your kids and your nieces and your nephews, when they read it, to be like, oh, he's like me. And listen, I write it for my own kids, right? I want my son, when he's bullied, to be like, yeah, I can be mad, but I can be better than what angers me. And that's what we all need as a lesson. You got to be better than what angers you.
Hey, Brad, let me ask you this. Like when you did, like Billie Jean King comes to mind, right? And when you did her book, you've been in contact with her and you've heard from her and was helpful in the process. Was there somebody, or like is there like a Mr. Rogers Foundation or like historical group? Like were there people behind the scenes that were like, hey, let us, we know your work. We know who you are. Let us read it. Like, were there people around him that you went to?
Always. I mean, every book we do, we find, listen, I know who I am. I try to do this as well as I can, but I can't be an instant expert on, whether it's whoever it might be. For this one, we went to Fred Rogers Productions, his company. I mean, if his wife was still alive, I'd go directly to her.
Sure.
We went to Fred Rogers Productions. We give him the book before it's done, and we say, tell us what we got wrong. Tell us what we're doing, incorrectly. They love the book so much. That's how we got, every I Am book starts with, I am Rosa Parks. I am Amelia Earhart. I am Dr. King, whatever it might be. This one, we were like, we can't start the book like that. How does every Mr. Rogers neighborhood start? It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, a beautiful day for we got to start with the song. And they were the only ones who could give us the song. And they were like, they love the book so much, they gave us the song. So the book starts, you see the entire song play out. He sings it, and then he says, hi, neighbor, I'm Mr. Rogers. And I'm like, I mean, again, when Chris Drew at Elliot, our amazing artist, I was again like, oh, this is a book that's going to undo me. Like, I can see it's going to undo me. And they read the book. And what I loved is the Mr. Rogers experts we spoke to, the part that they pulled out that they loved the most.
Can I guess? Can I guess?
Yeah, guess.
Is it his friend that he invites, his black friend, to be the police officer and to be in the pool and oh my God, to share this, the towel?
No, so we should talk about that, but no, that's an amazing moment. Mr. Rogers literally has no. They hated that part. They hated that whole anti-racism part. No, they know that part's going to be in the book. They know, like Mr. Rogers literally asked, a black man, a guy who plays Officer Clemens, to be the first recurring black character on children's TV. They literally share a kiddie pool together because Mr. Rogers realizes kids out there are not, obviously, if you're black, you weren't allowed to swim in the same pool as white people back then. So he's like, I'm going to make a kiddie pool, put my feet in it with the police officer's feet, and we're going to share the pool together, and millions of kids are going to see us being nice to each other.
I thought that was like one of the greatest moments in the book. I love that part of the book.
And by the way, the guy who plays him, Francois, says, why are you asking me, a black person, to play a police officer on your show? And he says, Mr. Rogers says, children need helpers, and I knew you'd be a wonderful role model. I mean, the guy is fighting racism like right on TV in front of you, and nobody is like realizing it. But the moment that they liked and pulled out, of course they know I'm going to put that in there. But they liked the fact that I showed that he had it, that he lost. You know, he wasn't always perfect. They said Mr. Rogers, they told me, will be the first one to say he's not perfect.
Right.
And anyone who said he was perfect, that would like drive him crazy. And I love the fact that they pulled out that part that he's human, and all of us have moments where we're scared and we're angry and we're blue and whatever we are. And as Mr. Rogers would say more than anyone, it's okay to feel however you're feeling. That's a good thing. That's what his show is all about.
Can I tell you the other big thing that I learned in the book?
I'm ready.
I always thought it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. I had no idea it was this neighborhood.
Yeah, you got to get the lyrics right.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the thing is, I had to go through, and trust me, I did too. I mean, that's what it's called. That's what the show's called. So there's another line in there that I've been singing wrong my entire life. I forget what it is. I don't know. Maybe it's a neighborly day for a beauty, you know. And I'm like, oh, that's it. I'm looking at it right now. It's a neighborly day in this beauty wood. And I was always like singing it some other way, and I'm like, I don't care that I undo my own childhood. I'm going to get it right. I don't care.
Now, by the way, what were you like? You started by mentioning you got home from D.C. and in time for Halloween. Were you dressed as, well, not as Mr. Rogers? It wasn't like you tried to look like him, just the outfit. But were you just at the White House reading the book?
So this is how ridiculous it is. So I get a phone call that the White House wants me to come down. They do an All Hallow read where they invite 8,000 children to the White House, military family kids, Gold Star family kids, local kids from public schools there, a whole slew of kids with disabilities. And they're like, we want you to come to the White House and read I Am Wonder Woman. I'm like, no problem. They hire a giant woman, Letty, this professional wrestler to dress as Wonder Woman, which is, I'm like, great. I've fantasized my whole life to be at the White House with Wonder Woman. Yes, let's do it. Like, this is all the things I love in one place. So I'm ready to go. And then they see me on television dressed as Mr. Rogers on one of the morning shows. And they call me. They're like, forget Wonder Woman. We need you to dress like Mr. Rogers. And when the White House calls you and says, come to the White House dressed as Mr. Rogers, you know what you do? You dress as Mr. Rogers and come to it. So I'm literally walking around the White House 2 days ago on Monday, dressed as Mr. Rogers. And Chris Eliopoulos is dressed as Superman. He's got Clark Kent with his big S on his chest. And we're looking at each other and we're like, how the hell did we get to this moment? I'm standing with President Biden, with the First Lady. I'm dressed in a red sweater as Mr. Rogers, and Chris is holding his chest open like Superman. And by the way, there's a giant 6'1" Wonder Woman with a sword with me. And I go through security with her, and the Secret Service say to her, we can't let you bring the weapon in. And I'm like, she is Wonder Woman. And the Secret Service, no joke, you can look in the pictures that I'm going to post today on my Instagram and Twitter and everywhere. And the Secret Service look at her sword and look at her, and they go, yeah, it's cool. And they let her in with the sword. And she's the only person on the entire White House grounds that has a weapon, because they're just like, you can't stop Wonder Woman, man. She's got a cool sword.
That's pretty cool. By the way, I'm looking at a picture now. But yeah, you're not joking. That is a very tall Wonder Woman.
I mean, she is gigantic. Like I said to her, like, you understand. And at one point, we're standing outside on the South Lawn, and she goes, I have an idea. And she takes her golden lasso and she literally puts it around me. And now I'm like, you know how many puberty fantasies you're unlocking right now?
I was just going to say, when she put it on you, was she able to get it around your boner?
I mean, it was just like, I was like, my wife, I sent immediately the picture to my wife, and she's like, she's like, I'm beside myself. You're literally dressed as Mr. Rogers, and Wonder Woman has tied you up in her magic lasso. Like, it is everything that is my childhood all in one place. Like, it's fantastic.
All right, I have two other things for you, Brad, real quickly, because I know I'm going to run out of time. Number one, what is and I don't know which one of your kids it is. What is the crazy World Series thing that you have with your kid?
This is going to cost me so much money potentially. Okay, so here's what it is. So my oldest, who's in college now, he's a crazy sports fan. He's, we've talked about him for years. And so Jonas every year at the beginning of the baseball season, I make a deal with him. I say, you can pick one team to go to the World Series, and if you pick the right team, I'll take you to that World Series. But of the 30 Major League Baseball teams, you got to pick from the bottom 15 teams. So usually it's 50-1 odds or worse.
Right.
In 10 years, he's never come close, never even picked a playoff team. It's just so hard. This year, he picked the Texas Rangers. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And by the way, this is when we went to visit my daughter at college this weekend. We're going to the White House on Monday, and he picks the team that's in, and he's like, Dad, you promised World Series. I'm like, I'm not leaving your sister or the White House to make this bet come true. Like, you're insane. So we have tickets to go to Game 6. He has, the tickets are in hand. I've had to get them, and the Rangers were nice enough to give me tickets. But if the Rangers win tonight, we're going to push it to next year because obviously it won't be a Game 6. So tonight we are clearly. My son is like, but we got to go, and I'm like, what do you want me to do? Make Arizona win? Like, I can't. So that's.
And by the way,
friggin' pulled it off
when he chose the Rangers, and you showed the date. It's March 31st. It wasn't like, whoa, the Rangers are coming on. You couldn't have
50-1 odds.
Thank you.
50-1 odds. I'm a dope. I'm like, I should have bet the team with whatever he picks. I'm so stupid.
But there's part of me, like, I'm pulling for the Rangers to win. There's part of me that almost wants Arizona to win just so you have to go to the game not tomorrow, but the next night.
I want to go. I'm excited to go. It's going to be fun. Like, we're going to go. It's going to be great. It's not like I don't want the Rangers to win because I'm rooting for them, but like, I want to go to the World Series. It's going to be awesome. But I feel like I cannot believe that he picked the team 50-1 odds. I'm like, I made that promise to be a good dad, but I was like, it'll take him like 20 years to do it. I'm like, how he pulled this off. And I'm like, and this is what happens when your kid studies analytics in college. I'm like, stupid studying. Like, it screwed me.
And then last thing, and Brad, if it's too hard to explain, or let me rephrase that. If it's going to be too hard for me to understand, just say we're not talking about it. But what is Ghost Machine?
Okay, so Ghost Machine, first of all, I'm going to tell you, you're not going to understand, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Okay.
Basically, there's DC and there's Marvel and there's like Image. These are comic book companies that publish comics you love. So buddies of mine, Jeff Johns, and amazing artists in comics decided, you know what? We've worked for DC, we've worked for Marvel. Why don't we make our own comic books with our own company? And so we are doing exactly that, and Ghost Machine is the name of the company. It's like the Ghost in the Machine, which is like your magical inspiration. So we literally started. It was in the New York Times. They just announced it. And so I'm going to come out. My next comic book, instead of being from DC or Marvel, which I've written for before, is going to be from Ghost Machine. It is the nerdiest, great comic book. It's basically about ghosts in the White House. And that's all I'm going to say, but it's like a really, really cool story.
But you're creating your own, like it's not like Iron Man is a ghost in the White House or something.
No. It's our own real characters. Like, maybe say I write a novel, I make up my own characters. This is the same thing, but I'm going to do it for a comic book, make my own comic book characters.
All right.
And that is the nerdiest thing after talking about Mr. Rogers and the White House with Wonder Woman. Like, you literally went on like the pyramid of nerd to the peak of the pyramid. And the peak of the pyramid is, and you make your own action figures. Like, that's the very peak of it. And it's just, and your own comic book company.
All
like
right.
that. It can't get
awesome.
nerdier than that.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Although let me tell you something though. I'll leave you with this I went to the comic book. I went to New York Comic Con, and you go to New York Comic Con, and like, I actually haven't written a comic book in a long time, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, is this even going to work? Is it even any fun? And like, and this guy comes up in a wheelchair that's like an intense, wheelchair, like Stephen Hawking's wheelchair, not like an electronic one. And he's, his hands are all, gripped in that way that he can't control it. His mouth is open like Stephen Hawking. He's severely disabled. And he comes up to, where I'm signing. I immediately, of course, get up and walk around the table to be near him. He can barely speak. He has his daughter with him who's taking him around. And this guy's got to be like 50, 60 years old. And I lean in close because he can barely hear him. And he basically is like, he says to me, identity crisis. It's basically a Superman Batman story that I wrote for DC Comics. And he whispers it in my ear. And in that moment, I'm just like, I love my fellow comic book nerds. Like, I love that this gets to be this part of my life too. So it's been really, really fun, even as we're just starting to launch it. It's
Good
cool.
for you. Good for you. That's awesome. All right, I Am Mr. Rogers is out and available now. Brad, it's awesome. You weren't lying in that text. It is fantastic.
Yeah, and I'm going to tell. I can't believe you didn't say this. I'm going to say this right now because we have to say it. We are going to, when we do, the next book is I Am Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Right.
It marks the 10-year anniversary of the Ordinary People Change the World books. And when we go in Virginia, we're going to bring a special guest star. I told you who it is. You know who it is.
Yes.
Is it the greatest, nerdiest guest star we're ever going to have?
Yes. For you, 100%. For you, 100%. But wait a minute. So when is the event?
It's going to be it's January 12th, whatever that Friday is. The book comes out January 8th or 9th.
Right.
Whatever that Friday is in Tyson's Corner. Trust me, anyone listening, you're going to want to come to Tyson's Corner for that event because we're bringing a special guest star that no one's going to anticipate. It's going to be awesome. Does
the special guest star know that he or she is going?
I hope so. Otherwise, there'll be no special guest star. No, she knows. She knows. It's going to be awesome.
Oh, we're saying she. Okay, yeah. I mean, I know who it is, but yeah, no, that's awesome.
You know who it is.
That will be a big deal. That will be a very, very big deal.
Fun.
Yeah, no,
I hope it works out. I hope it works. I'm not saying it because you never know, but it should work. I hope it works out. And if not, you're just stuck with me and Chris, and that's the way it's going to be.
You know what's amazing?
But I think it's going to be awesome.
You know what I just realized? I've read over 31 books in 10 years,
and some of them have 10 words per page. It's pretty impressive.
I hate those pages. I like when it's just like he goes,
where are the pictures?
Yes. And then we just move right on to the next one. All right. I Am Mr. Rogers is out and available now. Brad Meltzer, I appreciate the time as always, my friend.
Love you. Love you all. You know that.